Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The morning sun reflected off the shiny windows of the Brighton Industries skyscraper, a well-known Atlanta company. Outside, everything seemed perfect: luxury cars, well-dressed employees, and superficial smiles. But inside, behind closed doors, much darker stories were unfolding. Clara Whitmore, the Human Resources Director, was feared by all the staff. Always impeccably dressed, hair pulled back, icy gaze, she embodied power, rigor, and, for many, a form of silent contempt. She never said things openly, but everyone knew that she made distinctions, especially towards those who did not fit into her ideal image of the company. That morning, she was leafing through a file, frowning, that of Marcus Johnson, an African-American employee in the accounting department. Competent, always punctual, never a harsh word, and yet, Clara had decided he had to leave. Seated in her leather armchair, she murmured disdainfully. "He hasn't done anything wrong, but he just doesn't seem in his place." Her assistant, a young woman who was clearly uncomfortable, dared to ask. "But he is one of our best players, Mrs. Whitmore." Clara looked up, her eyes icy. "I didn't ask for your opinion, Jenna. Bring him to my office at 10 o'clock. Meanwhile, on the 5th floor, Marcus was finishing a report that he had to hand in before the end of the morning. He had worked at this company for 5 years. Never late, never made a mistake. Yet, since Clara's arrival as director, he felt the heavy gaze, the subtle remarks, the forgotten invitations to important meetings. He knew something was wrong, but he didn't want to believe it was racism. When Jenna entered his office to tell him, "Mrs. Whitmore wants to see you at 10 o'clock sharp," he felt a pang of worry. He took a deep breath, closed his computer, and murmured, "Okay. I'll be there." At precisely 10 o'clock, he knocked on the door of the director's office. "Come in," Clara's dry voice echoed. When he entered, she didn't even glance at him. She continued typing on her keyboard for a few seconds before slowly raising her eyes towards him. "Sit down, Marcus." The tone was authoritarian, almost contemptuous. On the table, a thick folder bore his name, and next to it, an already sealed envelope. Marcus sat down, his heart pounding. He didn't know it yet, but in the coming minutes, his life would take an unexpected turn, a turn that would expose the truth hidden behind Clara Whitmore's hypocritical smile, and upset the entire balance of Brighton Industries. Clara Whitmore's office was a space that inspired fear. Bright white walls, a perfectly aligned glass desk, a modern clock whose ticking resonated like a reminder of the power of time. Nothing stood out, everything was cold, calculated, almost inhuman. Marcus entered slowly, his report file under his arm. His suit was simple but clean, his gaze respectful but worried. In front of him, Clara was leafing through documents without looking up. "You are late," she said in an icy voice. Marcus glanced at his watch. It was exactly 10 o'clock. "No, madam, I am on time," he replied calmly. Clara sighed. "Good. Sit down." The silence that followed was heavy, almost oppressive. She picked up her pen, pretended to read a sheet of paper, then slowly put it down. Marcus Johnson. 5 years with this company. Accounting department. No disciplinary reports, no lateness, no unjustified absences. She paused and finally looked up at him. "And yet, I have received several complaints regarding your behavior." Marcus frowned slightly. "Complaints? I don't understand." "From whom?" Clara shrugged. "Colleagues. I'm not allowed to reveal their names. They say that you are sometimes condescending. That you create tension in the team. That you have a difficult attitude." Marcus felt a surge of injustice tighten in his chest. "With all due respect, Ms. Whitmore, I have never had a problem with anyone. My reports are good, my figures are accurate, and I have always helped my colleagues when they needed me." Clara gave a small, ironic smile. Oh, I don't doubt it. But sometimes, Marcus, it's not what we do, it's what we give off. She emphasized that word, cleared. The tone, the look, everything sounded like a provocation. Marcus lowered his eyes slightly, trying to remain calm. Did I say or do something that could have been misinterpreted? You know, Marcus, Clara resumed, crossing her arms, some employees told me they didn't feel comfortable around you. You seem too self-assured. Maybe a little too proud. Marcus raised his head in surprise. Too proud? Because I do my job well? She sighed in exasperation, as if she were talking to a child. See, that's exactly the kind of tone I'm talking about. You have trouble accepting criticism. And that's a problem here. Silence fell again. Then she took an envelope from her drawer and slid it towards him. This is your termination letter. Effective immediately. Marcus stays fig. He felt his heart tighten, but he refused to show his anger. He slowly opened the letter. Motif, inappropriate behavior and lack of team spirit. He looked up. You know that's not true, he said in a trembling but firm voice. Clara leaned slightly towards him, her gaze full of restrained contempt. Marcus, sometimes you have to know when you're not a good fit for a company. It's not a question of skills. It's a question of image. This word. Image. Then he understood. It wasn't his work she was judging. It was him. His very being. His existence in an office where, in her opinion, he didn't belong. He took a deep breath and discreetly clenched his fist. Then he stood up, took the letter, and said calmly. Thank you, Mrs. Whitmore. Have a good day. Before leaving, he simply added. But believe me, one day the truth will come out. Clara raised an eyebrow, mockingly. The truth, Marcus? The truth is that some people aren't made for this kind of environment. That's all. He left without a word. And as the door closed behind him, Clara gave a satisfied smile. She thought she had won. But what she didn't know was that at that precise moment, fate had just turned against her. And that the man she had just humiliated would be at the heart of a revelation that would destroy everything she thought she controlled. The day after Marcus Johnson was fired, the atmosphere in the corridors of Brighton Industries had changed. People were whispering, avoiding eye contact, and everyone was pretending not to know anything. But everyone knew. Marcus, for his part, had gone home, with dignity, without raising his voice. He had spent the evening sitting in his living room, the dismissal letter placed on the coffee table, his eyes lost in the void. He kept replaying the scene over and over. Every word, every glance from Clara Whitmore, that cold contempt. He couldn't understand how 5 years of effort, respect, and loyalty could be erased with the stroke of a pen. While he was mulling over these thoughts, another person, at the same time, was also unable to sleep, Emily Carter, head of the communications department. A young woman of 30, intelligent, honest, and above all endowed with a keen sense of justice. She had seen everything. Absolutely. A few days before the dismissal, she had stayed late at the office to finalize a report. That's where she overheard a conversation in the corridor, Clara's voice distinct, harsh, almost hateful. I want Marcus to leave. He doesn't belong here. He doesn't fit our image, and I don't want to see him in this department anymore. The man she was speaking to, a complicit executive, had replied. But, his results are excellent. And Clara retorted, in a scathing tone. I don't care about his results. It's not about numbers. It's about appearances. Emily couldn't believe it. She had the presence of mind to discreetly record the conversation on her phone. At first, she didn't know what to do with it. But when she saw Marcus leave, head down, escorted by security, she knew she couldn't stay silent. The next day, she mustered her courage and discreetly went to the office of a man she trusted. Alexander Pierce, the group's new vice president, recently arrived to modernize Brighton Industries. A man renowned for his integrity and his rejection of corruption. When she entered, he looked up from his file. "Emily? You seem worried. What's going on?" She closed the door behind her. "This is about the dismissal of Marcus Johnson." He frowned. "Yes, I saw the report. Clara Whitmore claims he had behavioral problems." Emily took a deep breath, then took out her phone. "This report is a lie, Mr. Pierce. Listen to this." She started the recording. Clara's voice echoed in the office. "I don't want him here anymore. He's an eyesore in our team photos." A long silence followed. Alexander remained motionless, his gaze fixed on the void. Then, slowly, he put down his glasses. "This is very serious." "I know," Emily replied, her voice trembling, "but if I speak out, she'll destroy me. She has connections in every department." Alexander looked her straight in the eyes. "You had the courage to come here. And I promise you, Miss Carter, the truth will be told. And this woman will answer for her actions." He stood up, took the phone in his hands, then added, "Remain silent for the time being. I will handle this personally." Meanwhile, Marcus, at home, received an unexpected call. "Mr. Johnson? This is Vice President Alexander Pierce's office. Could you come tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock? It's important." Marcus remained silent for a few seconds, surprised. Yes, of course." He hung up, perplexed. Why were they calling him now, after he had been humiliated in front of everyone? He didn't yet know that this encounter would change everything. That the truth he was waiting for was about to be revealed. And that the same company that had trampled him would soon find itself on its knees before him. The following morning, the corridors of Brighton Industries vibrated with unusual activity. The employees were whispering things to each other. You could feel that something important was about to happen. On the top floor, in the large council meeting room, an emergency meeting had been called by Alexander Pierce, the vice president. All the executives were present, including Clara Whitmore, sitting upright, confident, with her legs crossed, a slight smile on her lips. She thought this meeting was about a routine performance report. But the serious glint in Alexander's eyes very quickly gave him a different impression. Alexander spoke in a calm but firm tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, the reason I have gathered you here this morning is because a serious situation threatens not only the integrity of our company, but also its reputation." A murmur rippled through the room. Clara frowned slightly, feigning incomprehension. "What is this about, Mr. Pierce?" she asked with a fake smile. Alexander waved his hand, and the giant screen behind him lit up. A progress bar appeared. He pressed lecture. And suddenly, Clara's voice echoed through the room. "I want this Marcus to leave. He doesn't belong here. He's an eyesore in our team photos." The silence that followed was icy. Clara felt her heart stop. She turned pale instantly. Alexander stared at her coldly. "Do you recognize that voice, Mrs. Whitmore?" She tried to smile, nervously. I don't understand where this recording came from." "It's taken out of context, obviously." "Taken out of context?" repeated Alexander, raising an eyebrow. "Would you like me to continue?" He restarted the band. "I don't care about his results. It's not about numbers, it's about appearances." One of the board directors sat up abruptly. "Clara, this is unacceptable. You fired an employee without any real reason? And on racial grounds?" She tried to defend herself. "No. That's false. This Marcus was behaving badly. I simply wanted to protect the company's image." Alexander stood up slowly, his hands resting on the table. His gaze was icy. "Let's talk about image." He signaled to the assistant to open the door. And to everyone's astonishment, Marcus Johnson entered the room. Clara froze. His breath caught in his throat. She remained silent, unable to understand what he was doing there. Marcus walked forward calmly, dressed in a dark suit, accompanied by another man she did not know. Alexander spoke. "Mrs. Whitmore, allow me to formally introduce you Mr. Marcus Johnson, external auditor appointed by the board of directors to evaluate Brighton Industries' internal practices." Clara's eyes widened. "Listener," she stammered. "That's impossible. He's just an employee from the accounting department." Alexander shook his head. "No. He was undercover. He was tasked with assessing our internal climate and hiring practices. He worked here discreetly for 5 years to understand how managers treated their teams." Marcus spoke for the first time. His voice was calm, composed, but full of gravity. "I wasn't looking for a confrontation, Ms. Whitmore. I was observing. I was listening. And what I saw deeply saddened me. You humiliated employees, manipulated reports, and created a climate of fear." She tried to cut. "That's not true. It's just a conspiracy against me." But Alexander cut her off abruptly. "The board has reviewed the recording. The evidence is irrefutable. And for your information, the employee who had the courage to report your behavior will be protected by our management." Clara stood up abruptly, red with anger. "This is a betrayal. You have no right to treat me like this. I gave 10 years of my life to this company." Alexander replied coldly. "And you have just destroyed its values in a few sentences." He took a folder out of his briefcase and placed it in front of her. "Here is your letter of immediate suspension. The legal department will contact you regarding the next steps." A heavy silence followed. Clara remained standing, trembling, her gaze vacant. Around her, not a single ally remained. All the faces she dominated yesterday were fleeing from her today. Marcus, for his part, looked at her without hatred. Only with a form of sadness. "You wanted to judge me on my appearance, Mrs. Whitmore. But sometimes, what we think we see is only a reflection of our own flaws." Then he left the room. And in the heavy silence he left behind, Clara finally understood that she had lost everything. The day after the board meeting, the atmosphere seemed lighter at Brighton Industries. The corridors, once marked by fear and silence, had regained a different energy, that of relief. The employees whispered, some exchanged glances of satisfaction, others of shame. The news spread like wildfire. Clara Whitmore had been suspended for serious misconduct. But for Marcus, it was not a victory. It was only a bittersweet relief. He arrived that morning dressed in the same dark suit, with a calm expression. The same faces that had averted their gaze a few days earlier now greeted him with respect. But he remained humble. He did not want to be treated as a hero, only as a man who had finally been heard. At the same time, in another office, Clara Whitmore was emptying her belongings. Her hands trembled slightly as she packed her pens and files into a box. Every sound of footsteps in the corridor made her jump. The door opened. It was Emily Carter. The young woman hesitated, then approached slowly. "Madam Whitmore," she said softly. Clara raised her head, her eyes red, without makeup. You came to taunt me?" she said bitterly. Emily shook her head. "No. I came because I think everyone deserves to understand what happened." Clara chuckled nervously. "Understand? You have no idea what it's like to bear the weight of this company, to have to maintain an impeccable image." "No, madam," Emily replied calmly, "what you wanted to maintain was not an image, it was your domination. You confused respect with fear." Clara lowered her eyes. Her fingers gripped the handle of the cardboard box as if to keep from collapsing. Emily added softly. "You had power, Mrs. Whitmore. You could have done something great with it." Then she left, leaving Clara alone in silence. For the first time in years, Clara felt a tear roll down her cheek. Not anger, but shame. A shame she had never felt before. Meanwhile, Marcus was summoned by Alexander Pierce to his large glass-walled office. The man stood up when he saw him enter and shook his hand respectfully. Marcus, please sit down. I want to thank you personally. I was just doing my job, Mr. Pierce. Marcus replied humbly. Alexander gave a slight smile. No, you did much more than that. You remained calm in the face of injustice. You acted with dignity, even while being humiliated. This kind of attitude deserves much more than simple recognition. He paused, then took a document out of his desk. The board voted unanimously. Effective immediately, you are appointed director of the Diversity and Inclusion Department. Marcus was speechless. I don't know what to say. Simply say that you will agree to continue inspiring others, replied Alexander with a genuine smile. Marcus nodded. I accept it. But I want one thing, that we not act out of revenge. That we act so that no one ever has to go through what I went through again. Alexander placed a hand on his shoulder. That's exactly why you're the right man for the job. A few days later, the media seized upon the case. A company director fired for racial discrimination, Brighton Industries reacts. Clara Whitmore's name was on the front page of all the business newspapers. Meanwhile, Marcus made his official return to the company. This time, he entered not as an ordinary employee, but as a respected leader. In the main hall, he ran into Emily. She smiled shyly at him. So, justice has finally been served. Marcus replied softly. Yes. But this isn't a victory against anyone, Emily. It's a victory for everyone. She nodded, her eyes moist. I'm happy to see you in your place. He replied, his gaze turned towards the large windows of the hall. No, Emily, at our place. And as they walked side by side towards the conference room, they both knew that a new chapter had just begun. Brighton Industries would never be the same again. And somewhere, in her empty apartment, Clara Whitmore finally understood that respect cannot be built on fear, but on justice and dignity. A month had passed since Clara Whitmore's fall. The headquarters of Brighton Industries had changed. The atmosphere was no longer heavy, faces were no longer tense, and above all, voices were no longer silenced. Under the leadership of Marcus Johnson, the Department of Diversity and Inclusion had implemented new programs. Training against discrimination, campaigns for mutual respect, and above all, a committee where every employee could be heard. But despite this new beginning, Marcus still harbored a certain melancholy. He was not driven by revenge, only by a sincere desire to transform pain into hope. One morning, as he was leaving a meeting, he spotted a familiar figure sitting in the company lobby. It was Clara Whitmore. She wore a simple suit, her hair down, without the arrogance that had once defined her. She stood up as he approached, visibly nervous. Marcus, she murmured in a hesitant voice. He remained silent, staring at her with a mixture of surprise and caution. I know I have no excuse. But I wanted to tell you that I was wrong. His words were simple, but sincere. She took a deep breath before continuing. I thought my position gave me the right to judge, to crush those I considered inferior. But when everything collapsed, I understood one thing: power without humanity is nothing. Marcus did not respond immediately. He watched this woman who, once, embodied everything he hated, but who now seemed broken and lucid. I don't blame you, Clara, he said finally, but I hope you will use this fall to change something, not just within yourself, but around you. Clara nodded slowly, her eyes misting over. That's what I intend to do. I've started working with an organization that helps young people from disadvantaged backgrounds find employment. It's my way of trying to repair some of what I've destroyed. Marcus gave a slight smile. So maybe all of this won't have been in vain. When she left the building, he stood for a moment watching her go. She was no longer the haughty and cold woman of the past. He was a person transformed by his mistakes, proof that shame, sometimes, can lead to redemption. A few weeks later, Marcus was invited to give a speech at a major conference on corporate justice. The room was full. Leaders, students, and employees from all walks of life had come to listen to him. On stage, he took a deep breath and said in a calm voice, "I was fired one day without a valid reason. Not because I was incompetent, but because I was different. That day, I understood that true courage is not about retaliating, but about remaining dignified when everything leads to anger. Today, I am not seeking to humiliate those who have humiliated me. I simply want to remind everyone that true power lies in respect. And that respect is not earned through fear, but through justice, kindness, and truth." The room erupted in applause. Some had tears in their eyes. Among the audience, a woman stood up discreetly, Clara Whitmore. She applauded, her eyes moist, her face serene. For the first time, she smiled sincerely. At the end of his speech, Marcus looked up at the glass ceiling of the conference center. A ray of light crossed the room, illuminating her face. He thought of all those who, like him, had been judged, rejected, hurt. And he knew that his fight was no longer just his own. It was the hope of all those who believed that one day, color, name or origin would no longer define the value of a human being. Hatred destroys, dignity elevates. Even in pain, remain upright. Because one day, the truth always triumphs.